You are obsolete, Mr. Wordsworth.
A lie. No man is obsolete.
You have no function, Mr. Wordsworth. You're an anachronism, like a ghost from another time.
I am nothing more than a reminder to you that you cannot destroy truth by burning pages.
You're a bug, Mr. Wordsworth, a crawling insect, an ugly, misformed little creature who has no purpose here, no meaning.
I am a human being.
Words, Mr. Wordsworth, that have no substance and no dimension.
They want to shut down our speech.
Like the wind.
I don't care. I tell you, I don't care. I'm a human being. I exist.
That's right.
And if I speak one thought aloud, that thought lives, even after I'm shoveled into my grave.
Illusions, Mr. Wordsworth. Illusions that you inject into
You're not
your
getting our
brain
free
to make
speech.
you think you have a strength when you have no strength at all. You have nothing but spindly limbs
Yeah,
and a
shut
dream.
up, bureaucrat.
And the state has no
Shut
use
up,
for your
control
life.
freak.
Resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. It's Alex Jones.
That's right. No amount of your staged events or your wind-up toy, drugged-out children of government bureaucrats are going to stop us from taking this republic back. We're going to Sheriff Richard Mack, who was a sheriff in the era of Arizona, who won at the Supreme Court, who knew Judge Roll, who was killed. Got a lot of suspicious stuff going on that front. Then coming up in about an hour, we have popping in for the last 30 minutes, Larry Pratt of Gun Owners of America on this situation. We're also going to be opening the phones up for John, Dave, Harry, Joe, Ryan, and many others. The toll-free number to join us is 800-259-9231. If you're from Tucson and you have any eyewitness reports or anything that's particularly key on the intel front, we're going to open up our phone lines here at my office, but only for people that have bombshell information. 877-789-ALEX, 877-789-ALEX, the main phone system, 800-259-9231. And so I go back as we go to Sheriff Richard Mack to our articles warning everyone back in 2010, top Fed repeats ominous absorb terror rhetoric. All these different White House officials and advisors making chilling comments about how they need staged terror attacks in America to be blamed on domestic groups so that people will then love Obama again and accept their agenda. And it's all right here. In fact, let me just pull you the Robert Shapiro clip. This is just one of them. Clinton and Obama advisor. The bottom line here is that Americans don't believe in President Obama's leadership, said Shapiro, adding, this is Financial Times of London, he has to find some way of demonstrating that he is a leader who can command confidence. And short of a new 9/11 event or an Oklahoma City bombing, I can't think of how he can do that. And I'm sorry to have to talk about mind control, but we know it's been declassified. They have them. You get into Harris and Kleinbold and Columbine. That was a staged event. It takes hours to go over the evidence. But we're joined for the next 55 minutes or so by a man who really needs no introduction, SheriffMack.com, former sheriff of Graham County, Arizona. In '94, he filed a lawsuit challenging the Brady Bill, ruled on by John M. Roll, the judge who was just murdered by the Grim Reaper character, who loves Karl Marx and likes to dress as a woman and burn American flags, but he's a conservative, the New York Times says. He's a lecturer on constitutional issues relating to gun control, law enforcement, and states' rights. And I had the pleasure of having him speak at an event I had in Central California a few months ago. And he's here with us now because he knows the players. He knows the gun grabber, anti-free speech, pimp, Sheriff Clarence Dupnick, what a dupe he is to tyranny. And he also knows the late and honorable, and he was an honorable judge, Roll. And he was a sheriff out in those parts, and he won at the Supreme Court. So we're going to go over that with Sheriff Mack, then I'm going to hit some new intel and get his take on it, and then your phone calls. Sheriff Mack, good to have you here with us.
Thanks a lot, Alex. It's a real sad day for America to address this issue, but especially to address the issue of one of the very few, if not the only, principled constitutional judge in America, and now he's gone. And as you said, He was the judge in my case, and he defended me. Everything that we stood for by principle, he stood with us. He made sure that those who were going after me were shot down, those who were trying to attack. Even my standing, the federal government said that Sheriff Mack can't even sue us because he has no standing, he doesn't represent the county, he's not a county commissioner, therefore has no business and no lawful authority to sue. Judge Roll shut that down. He said the only principle that really matters here is that the government is trying to force Sheriff Mack to violate his oath of office to comply with federal unconstitutional, unfunded mandates. He recognized it. He stood behind it. He had the courage to stand for what the truth was that I was actually trying to do. He's mentioned in all my books, especially from my cold dead fingers. And if anybody wants to pick that up, it's actually the very best quote I've ever heard. Can you imagine, Alex, that a federal judge, and this is on page 19, he said, Congress exceeded its authority under Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, actually quoted the enumerated powers of Congress and said they violated Article 1, Section 8, and therefore Mack wins because of the 10th Amendment. And this also, he was the only judge who heard this case out of dozens and dozens of judges who heard this case at the circuit court level and at the Supreme Court. He was the only one that said this also violated Mack's Fifth Amendment rights because it violates his right to due process.
Now, I want to go more over this, but as we're researching this deeply, it turns out that Congresswoman Giffords, we're going to play this clip next hour, was on Fox News the day before she was shot. And she was talking about breaking the left-right paradigm, coming together, cutting government, cutting congressional spending. If the Democrats and Republicans ever come together against the open borders, against the gun control, against the dollar devaluation, it's game over for the bankers. And I find it very suspicious that Judge Roll, who was for controlling the border and was meeting with her about the deteriorating security, he'd been criticizing that 80-plus miles into Arizona is now controlled by Mexico. It turns out that, and I'm going to get to this a little bit later after you talk more, top U.S. federal judge assassinated after threat to Obama agenda. It turns out that in a key ruling in an SVR report, federal judge John McCarthy Roll was the chief judge for the United States District Court for the District of Arizona, who this past Friday issued what was called a preliminary ruling in the case of United States of America versus the 333-520 in United States currency, and then they have the case number filed, wherein he stated he was preparing to rule against Obama's power to seize American citizens' money without clear and convincing evidence of a crime being committed. So he was going up against the Know Your Customer Patriot Act stuff, and how key this ruling was. There's been other rulings against grabbing people's homes without proper deeds. He was going in that direction. I tell you, very convenient that these two got shot for the Obamanoids. I mean, if this was a so-called conservative out to kill liberals, he sure killed and wounded the wrong people, Richard Mack.
Oh, no question. Now, there's no question that Gabby Giffords is a good woman. She has been very independent. I don't agree with all her views, but she was pro-Second Amendment. She was working against illegal immigration. She has a gun and carries a gun. Even if she would have had a gun in her hand, I don't think she would have been able to shoot back on this particular instance. But, yes, when somebody told me that Judge Roll was at her rally, I said, no way. I said, federal judges are not supposed to go to public political rallies like that. And then they said, oh, well, he was just shopping at Safeway and just happened out right at the wrong moment, and he was saying hello to Congresswoman Giffords. Yeah,
now we're told he wanted to meet with her about the deteriorating situation. He wanted to meet with her after. Correct. I think something else was going on. I smell a big, fat, dirty rat.
Well, I did at the very beginning, and when my son called me, I was actually speaking again in California. My son called me in the morning, and he didn't know it was Judge Roll, and all my family know Judge Roll very well because he's in all my books. And and they remember his name because he was the first one to hear my case. And I was just absolutely floored at my next meeting when a person in the audience told me that the judge that was murdered was Judge John Roll. This is an absolutely principled constitutional man, a man who would do anything to stand for freedom for our country. And then he gets snuffed out by somebody who actually admits on his own emails that there are such things as mind control, brainwashing, and all this other crap. And then he goes through with this absolute horrendous murder. And how could anyone look at that beautiful little girl and shoot her like that? It has to be somebody who's completely deranged or completely manipulated.
Absolutely. Who could shoot a 9-year-old girl? I mean, you look in this murderer's eyes, and then there's all the witnesses. He's the reported murderer, and he is just completely crazed. But now we learn one personality, he dressed up like a woman. Another, he did devil worship. Another, he went out and helped people locally with their animals. I mean, this guy sounds like the classic multiple personality fruitcake. And now the New York Daily News and others are reporting the teachers are saying in college he would come in and basically say, I'm under mind control. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, come on.
And I'll tell you another thing, Alex. I told my son who it was. I didn't know this kid's name, but I said, this is going to be a white, deranged, supposed constitutional guy and a Loughner. And sure enough, here it comes. I knew it before it was even reported who he was.
Yeah, my gut told me that, too. I was hoping above hope. What do you think about the bizarre voodoo? He's got the skull with the oranges. For those that don't know, that's an offering to Beelzebub. You know, even in voodoo, they've got the light and the dark voodoo. This is the darkest type of voodoo here.
Well, these things are real, and that's why you've got to steer away, and what we've said all along is to steer away from those who participate in the Satan worship. It can create a mind control. It can create brainwashing.
Well, why did his parents allow this big tent in the back with sofas? And, I mean, he had a whole setup out there. Well, what parents let their kid have a full-board devil worship outfit?
And again, all of that's crazy. And instead of Sheriff Dupnick, Pima County Sheriff in Tucson, and others in this country, Congresswoman McCarthy now calling for more gun control, if all these idiots would keep their mouth shut and try to investigate and see what went on and attack the problem instead of attacking freedom and the Constitution, we're going to make it somewhere on this issue. But the first thing is I would ask any sheriff or any police officer, why did not Tucson PD have security there at an outdoor political rally of a congresswoman? Why didn't the sheriff have security there?
When I spoke at Santa Cruz with you, I didn't even ask for it, and they had like 30 people.
I know. Security was everywhere, and I'm glad they were. I was glad to see security at our event there. You had a tremendous event out there. It was jam-packed, standing room only, 900 people, maybe 1,000, both nights, 2 nights in a row, and there was security there. She's a congresswoman, for God's sakes, and she's 1 hour, she's 60 minutes from the border, and they have no security at an outdoor event for her?
When there are public hits on members of Congress, federal judges, and sheriffs on record that have been standing for border control.
Yeah, and this Sheriff Dupnick has been criticizing all the other sheriffs who have been fighting the illegal immigration. He with the other sheriff from Santa Cruz, Sheriff Estrada, those two have been fighting the other sheriffs, and these are sheriffs who are getting shot at multiple times, deputies and others getting shot at out in these desert areas where the cartels are now bleeding over into Arizona, and these sheriffs are putting their lives on the line, Sheriff Babu especially, in Pinal County, which is right next to Pima County. And then Sheriff Dupnick, what does he do? He criticizes the sheriffs, tells the entire nation that illegal immigration is not a problem, and those of you trying to fight it are a bunch of racists and bigots. How absurd can we get?
And he's saying that it's our fault when this Grim Reaper Marxist lover never said anything about immigration.
And not only that, Sheriff Dupnick is now blaming the Tea Party movement, the Constitutionalists, and other people on radio talk shows that it's our rhetoric And so he's basically telling America and people in Arizona and his constituents who are Tea Party members, and there's a lot of them there, that you should be quiet and support your government so people like this don't get bad ideas from what you are saying. How absurd can you get?
Unbelievable. I want to get into the move to shut down free speech, open legislation being proposed, the attack on the Second Amendment, and a lot more with Sheriff Richard Mack and more on Judge Roll. Stay with us. I've got a lot more key information coming up. We'll be right back. We're doing a search term today so that it will lead people all over the Internet back to Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com in our detailed article, Liberal Smear Machine Backfires After Gunman Found to be a Cultist, Pot-Smoking Left-Winger. And folks, you know I'm for drug decriminalization. I'm not bashing pot smokers. But the point here is that for mentally ill people, I've read the studies. It may help you if you've got cancer or glaucoma. I know it's got a lot of medical uses, but it is classified in the hallucinogenic area. And time again, marijuana does make schizophrenics. You can look it up. They recommend schizophrenics not use any drugs, but helps push them deeper into the psychosis for whatever reason. It can also have positive psychological effects on other people, but you know, different things are different for everybody. You know, that's the old, stuff about opiates. Sometimes with Native Americans, you can't knock them out with that for surgery. They've got to use something else. It's different for every person. And schizophrenics, it is not the way to go. But again, it could be mind control, could be a schizophrenic. But we're doing the search term liberal smear machine. Let's put that in Google over and over again, liberal smear machine. And let's also do... the headline, let's fire another torpedo in the info war, gunman left-winger. Gunman left-winger. That's the second search term. So liberal smear machine and liberal left-winger. Sheriff Richard Mack, again, who was a sheriff down there and knows all these players. What is it like, I mean, because I know you're doing the research, but I've seen all over the news that he was talking about killing people at college. The police had been to his house. Why didn't they execute a search warrant? Why hadn't he been put in psychiatric care, or was he? We're not being told that. I mean, they're acting very suspicious. This sheriff won't talk about what they've got out of his safe, and then won't say it's proof that it's right-wing. I mean, this sounds like a lot's going on here when he's got a full-bore black magic temple in his backyard.
Well, I would like to first ask the sheriff, why aren't you going after the people who got him the marijuana? He wasn't growing his own, so let's find out who his drug source was. Let's arrest them for being accomplices, and maybe we should make laws against marijuana. Oh, whoops, it's already against the law. He couldn't get marijuana. It's against the law. Yeah, he was a pothead. He was a kook, and we don't believe that he was ever institutionalized. Because he was able to buy a gun just a few months ago, and he had to do obviously go through the criminal background check from the Sports Authority where he bought the gun. So most of those, but again, some mental history records are not immediately available to those kinds of checks, even though the FBI has tried to increase those and put them on their list. Those are a little bit more difficult to deal with, even for the FBI and all their...
Well, we also know they're already trying to use it against military veterans, so they're going to use it as a discriminatory system. I'd rather just have the people be armed to defend ourselves from loons. Well,
absolutely. And the whole thing is... the leaders, including Sheriff Dubnik and our own Congress, are going to use this to take guns away from you and me. Innocent, law-abiding citizens are going to pay the price for this because they're going to come after us. Now, Arizona just recently, this might be another spoke on the wheel here of this whole story. Arizona just 6 months ago went to a constitutional form of Second Amendment adherence. We no longer require permits of any kind. You can carry open or concealed. No money, no fees, no licenses, no permits, no asking mother may I.
And that's Vermont style. You know, if this would have been a Republican rally, I'll guarantee you half the people would have been packing and he would have been shot down even faster.
He wouldn't have got the second shot off if the people I know in Tucson that are just the normal Tea Party groups and the gun rights groups, if any of them had been there, this guy would have never shot that little girl.
Oh, it makes me sick. And now they're going to try to use her murder to take our sacred First Amendment and Second Amendment. But her father, have you heard this, Sheriff Mack? I'll ask you when we come back in 60 seconds. World Socialist website is saying Arizona assassination spree tied to political right. Oh, really? Well, his favorite book was a Communist Manifesto, and he liked to dress up like a woman. The Grim Reaper was called Very Liberal by his friends. I mean, just incredible. Sheriff Mack, I've got the New American Magazine here in front of me. This is linked up on InfoWars and Prison Planet. ATF plans registration in border states. Now they're trying to extrajudicially say they want, when people buy rifles, for it to be reported to the ATF, not just go through the NICS system. But the statistics I've read, most of the weapons being used by drug cartels down there are being bought from the military themselves. They're fully auto, and there's hand grenades and stuff.
Yeah, all that's true, and I guarantee you that none of the things that they want to do as far as registration or more background checks or more any kind of checks would have stopped this. That's why they have to take this, Alex, to the next level, and they've got to confiscate guns. That's the only thing that will have any appeasement to these gun grabbers. And, boy, we better be watching out, because this is a direct hit at the Second Amendment.
Well, I mean, regardless of who's really behind it, it looks staged. I mean, I've never seen them come out of the closet as tyrants. But they even want the First Amendment. They say anything that could be construed as making someone else angry is going to be banned.
That's right, and so that means they're coming after you, they're coming after me, they're coming after the Tea Party movement, and it's really an amazing process how these things are exploited. And just as you mentioned, the little green girl's father said, "You're not going to exploit my daughter's death to promote your own political liberal agenda, and especially to go after more gun control." What a great man.
Yeah, if one of my daughters was gunned down, I'll guarantee you 48 hours later, I would probably not even be able to talk. But you hear him break up and crack up, and it just tears my guts out.
It does me as well. I've shed tears over this over the weekend several times, especially when I knew it was that little girl, and especially Judge John Roll. Judge John Roll changed my life. A lot of what he did is what I'm doing now, because of what he did and what he stood for and what he said is in my books.
No, you always talk about him.
And in my presentation.
You always talk about him when you're on the show.
Every time. Every time. Yes.
And a guy who likes to wear women's clothes and dress up like the Grim Reaper has killed him, and then we get to be blamed for it.
Absolutely astonishing that they can make that big of a turn, but when you get liberals who will not comply with principles of freedom, who will not comply with their oath of office, who now read the Constitution and then make fun of it afterwards, you know where this type of stuff can come from.
Unbelievable. We're about to go to break. Long segment coming up. We're going to take calls, but any other pieces of info you want to talk about dealing with Judge Roll?
Yes. On page 2 of my little book, he says this, and this is what I've quoted on your show numerous times. I'm reading right out of my book. Federal District Judge John Roll, Mack is thus forced to choose between keeping his oath or obeying the law, subjecting himself to possible sanctions. He was really worried about the sanctions that were going after me. He protected me because they said in the Brady bill that they would arrest me if I failed to comply, or any other sheriff. And so Judge Roll stood up for me in particular because I was the only one filing the lawsuit at that time.
Isn't that interesting? You get this conservative Democrat, you get this federal patriot judge killed by this ultra-liberal, and it's so convenient now the media gets to blame it on the Tea Party. Boy, isn't that convenient? That's very... And he's running around everywhere saying he's under mind control. But we're just supposed to ignore that, huh, Sheriff?
Yeah, let's just don't look at the man behind the curtain.
I'd like to know who his psychiatrist was. We'll be right back. Representative Carolyn McCarthy, whose husband and son were killed on that commuter train back in the early 90s by that other lunatic. It was done in an area where it's a victim disarmament zone. No guns allowed predominantly in many areas of the state, but 100% gun ban on that train. You notice these people love generally to go where it's a school or some other place where they know people aren't going to be armed. So they can carry out their ghoulish deed. And as the culture and the media hypes it, mentally ill people get the idea, well, I'll go commit suicide by waving a gun around on the Brooklyn Bridge, and the cops will come and shoot me. And that's what this guy talked about. He talked about his assassination, how the police would then assassinate him. But that didn't happen. This lunatic's now going to be in a supermax prison for the rest of his life, and probably executed after a few decades of that. But McCarthy readies gun control bill, and in her bill, she says, and we will not allow him to have an arsenal of ammunition like he had. So she says not only will semi-automatic guns of any type be banned in the bill she's about to introduce, but she went on to say that he will not be allowed to have the amount of ammo he had. So I guess now having 18 rounds is a arsenal. I guess you get one bullet, kind of like Australia, Richard Mack?
Yeah, I saw her comments. I've actually debated her back during the Brady Bill times. She is a woman who cares nothing about history. She cares nothing about the rule of law. She believes that gun control somehow would have made her family safer. Well, they already had gun control, just as you mentioned, extreme gun control. So the only thing, as we were pointing out earlier, Alex, that can take this to the next level is not more background checks. The only thing can be confiscation and complete gun control, which means innocent, law-abiding citizens will not be able to get these.
But then that doesn't work in Mexico. They've got a crime rate off the charts compared to us.
Absolutely. In fact, Mexico is a war zone, and citizens are not allowed to have guns there. No one is. And yet it is a war zone there, and in fact, the drug war has destroyed that country, almost completely stopping tourism in the northern part of the area because people are afraid to go down there anymore.
Well, here's a quote. Here's a quote by McCarthy. She says that my staff is working on looking at different legislation fixes that we might be able to do to introduce as early as today. That was yesterday. She said tomorrow. She goes on here to say that many said that people with a history of mental instability, like the alleged shooter, Jared Lee Loughner, should not be able to buy a gun. Well, I mean, how do you know beforehand? And no one should be able to buy stockpiles of ammunition used by the 22-year-old assailant. He had 18 rounds of... So that's a stockpile now? What does that mean?
It means you and I are in trouble and other law-abiding citizens. We are the ones that they're going to attack. This is something that they are loving to exploit what this was for their own gun control liberal agenda. And that's why I told my son, I know darn well who this shooter is, because this is something that they had to have happen.
We got a lot of phone calls here. We're going to continue with phone calls right through Larry Pratt coming up in about 30 minutes. And I'm going to go into the fourth hour today as well. I'll make sure we get to everybody because I've got a lot of other points that I haven't made yet. And I want to speak directly to the gun grabbers coming up briefly in the start of the next hour. But right now, I'm going to hurry through these. Question or quick comment for Sheriff Richard Mack. John in Texas, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, Alex. You know, Australia, Canada, and Britain used to have the same gun rights we did, but because of the same cookie-cutter, lone deranged gunman, now they lost all their rights. And not only that, they have free speech restrictions there now, too, where you can't say certain things or they put you in jail. They're almost what I call soft-core communist police states. And that's what the globalists have really got designed for this country. They got to have gun control. We're the last country besides us and Switzerland are the only two countries where they have free access to the guns, so they got to have an excuse to get them out of our hands.
And a few years ago, they had a psychiatric patient go into one of their state governments and kill a bunch of people. I mean, how many times do we have to see this repeat itself over and over and over again? It's very suspicious. Anything else, John?
No, that's just about it.
Sheriff Mack, your comments on what John just said.
Well, he's absolutely correct, and everything that has failed in Europe, we now want to embrace in America, and our leaders here are doing it, including the one that led us in a moment of prayer this morning from the White House lawn.
Disgusting. He just prays that he'd be able to enslave us. Let's talk to Dave in Ohio. Dave, you're on the air.
How you doing, Alex? How you doing, Sheriff?
Good, thanks.
Yes, I had come across something on YouTube on Congresswoman Giffords' YouTube channel. She has the part of them where you subscribe to other
she
channels.
has two friends, and one of them is the Grim Reaper Loughner.
Now, what is that? I mean, was that before or after? Was it hacked? I mean, that's
no.
weird.
We've checked it, and it appears that it happened after the shooting. We've gone to the Google archive, and it looks like it wasn't there just a few weeks ago.
And I just have a message to the usurping, gun-grabbing slime filth of this country. Come and take it.
Well, that is the issue. If they do try to disarm us like the Nazis did, it's gonna be a serious situation. And that's what the globalists want, folks. Let's fix the country peacefully. Let's take our counties and cities back. Let's not let them use fake terror and hyped up events to scare us into submission, to give up our First Amendment or our Second Amendment or our property rights. Let's stand strong and come together. And that's why, and we're going to play this later, Congresswoman Giffords, she was talking about shattering the left-right paradigm, and for a Democrat was pretty conservative on the border and Second Amendment. And a lot of Democrats had been attacking her for voting against Nancy Pelosi and others.
Exactly. She was independent. She was an Arizonan by heart. And so she was standing for her people on several issues. Yeah, she was still a Democrat on some issues, but on some real key issues, she was very independent and very Arizona. And
a guy that all his friends called very liberal, extremely liberal, who liked to dress up like a girl, who liked to dress up like the Grim Reaper, who you know, in between the time he was doing voodoo rituals in his own little voodoo temple in the backyard that Mommy and Daddy, I guess, knew about and let him have at 20-something years old. Now we're blamed for that. No, you will not blame us for that. If this guy claimed he was a Tea Partier and ran American flags up to the top of the pole every day, it's still not my fault what somebody else does. But to claim that this freak represents true conservatives is a fraud and a stinking joke. I'm going to go to our phone line system here, 877-789-ALEX. Let's talk to Mark in Texas and then JB. Mark, you're on the air with Sheriff Richard Mack. Okay, he's gone.
How are you?
Okay, Mark, you there? Yeah.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Do y'all know about Joe Zamudio, the hero that ran into the action and subdued the gunman? He was packing... He had a gun on him. Yeah, I seen him on Fox News today, and they didn't know that at first, but when they found out, I mean, their jaws just dropped to the ground. And I'm sure they're going to try to bury this guy. I couldn't find him anywhere else, but he's on a YouTube video with Geraldo, did an interview with him. So you might want to check that out.
Yeah, I'm glad you called, because I heard them say a man with a gun subdued him, and then we've been looking for days, and it's so buried we can't find it. Oh, we have it? Okay, well, then I'll take it if you got it. And if you got the Geraldo, we'll post it on InfoWars or Prison Planet. But they've really been trying to bury that, haven't they, Sheriff Max?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they did. They tried to bury it. However, he was just a little bit late getting there with his gun. They actually were trying to report that he had a gun, but it wasn't loaded. No, I don't believe that's the case. What happened is he went into the store and heard the shooting and went back out there, and then I think the suspect was reloading at the time, trying to put in another clip, and that's when the guy decided to tackle him, and then somebody helped him, and then a third person came over and sat on him as well. But what I would say, if any of the Tea Party people I know, and I've talked over at 100 Tea Parties across this country in the last year and a half, not once did anybody ever mention that we should kill politicians, that we should kill anybody, that this was a call to arms. No one has ever talked about that, Alex, at any of the Tea Party groups ever. They want, yes, they're mad, they're frustrated, but all they want is their Constitution back, and they want the politicians who swear an oath to actually follow the Constitution to pretend to do it sometimes, and they're sick and tired of watching this corruption, and they want some answers, and they want a change in our country. That's all they're asking for.
Okay, local radio is reporting that gunman was shot by defender in the crowd, and we have Fox News' Shepard Smith now reporting this, so our webmasters are going to get it up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. But if they have successfully kept it quiet, that the guy actually shot him, or that may be a misreport. Sheriff Mack, again, you've got that he only came out and helped tackle him but didn't use his gun?
Correct. That's the story I've got at this point. But I think this comes back to a point you were making earlier. This idiot, this lunatic, thought he was going to be shot. He knows that people have guns in Arizona. He knows people have guns in Tucson. He expected to be that there would be security. He expected that after he got 4 or 5 off, that somebody was going to shoot him. This was his way to go out in a blaze of glory. He expected to be assassinated, and
Boy, can you imagine this spoiled brat living with mommy and daddy at 22? Can you imagine what he's going to like, a Supermax and then lethal injection?
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, he is so crazy, maybe he needs to just be in a mental institution. I mean, he's clearly completely a fruitcake.
Well, the people in his class at Pima Community College had reported him to the school and teachers and security and others, saying this guy's a kook, he's violent, he's crazy, get him out of here. They took action, but law enforcement, I guess, never did.
Well, they went to his house, and they promised to put him in psychiatric care. And if they did put him on the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, it's on the drug insert. It can trigger psychotic violent breaks. Sheriff Mack, stay there, my friend. More calls straight ahead from JB, Sean, and many others. Randy, Joe, Mark, Amy, you name it. Within 2 years, the United Nations estimates there'll be 7 billion people on this globe. In fact, I have the latest National Geographic here. Population 7 billion. How your world will change. What, with a couple 100 million more people? Well, it won't change. Except they want to sell you on humans being bad, humans being evil. We've shown you all these environmental ads where it shows young school children who won't submit to carbon tax, so their teacher murders them. There's this anti-human, pro-death, obsession with death, nihilistic movement being pushed by the so-called environmentalists who are really eugenicists. And that's the article we haven't written yet for Infowars.com or PrisonPlanet.com. That's the story we haven't gotten to yet, is that they're the ones promoting the culture of death. And I don't even call them liberals. They're just fascist, death-loving, death-pushing control freaks posing as liberals. Now, we've got Larry Pratt popping in, but I will get to JB, Sean, John, Joe, Randy, Mark, Amy. I'm going to get to all of you. We're going into a full 4th hour of overdrive. I'll also have a message to the gun grabbers and the globalists. I have this article I want to read in its entirety. Talk about piercing research. I want to get my crew on this. Top U.S. federal judge assassinated after threat to Obama agenda. When I learned what Judge Rohl was doing on a key executive order with Obama and the executive order 13528 dealing with the 10 FEMA governors, this judge was really on target. And then talking to Sheriff Mack, how he was a pro-Second Amendment patriot, I tell you, this whole thing stinks worse and worse by the minute. Sheriff Mack, let's finish up our talk with Judge Rohl and how important he was to you. He's in all your books. You talked about him in one of your speeches you gave out in California with yours truly. You talked about him every time you come on this show. You really admired him as one of the few good federal judges. And then magically he's dead. And by this guy running around saying he was under mind control.
Yeah, the coincidences just keep piling up, and after you get to 10 or 15 of them, you know, maybe they weren't coincidences. Very rarely do things happen in our government today that are just coincidence. However, be that as it may, Judge John Rohl was a good man. In my very first book, we dedicate a lot of it to what he did and said. On page 19, his ruling is quoted. I've never seen any judge be more forthright and constitutional in a ruling in my life. I've been around a lot of judges, probably hundreds, but I've never seen anybody stand for foundational American principles like this man did. If it wasn't for him, I would not have made it through this. His decisions propelled upheld me to the Supreme Court, and a lot of what he said in the original was used then. One thing, when I was testifying at the district court level, which was the only place any of the sheriffs involved in this testified, was at the district court. In his courtroom, I was testifying, and the lawyer for the federal government was attacking me and cross-examining me. And then she turned to the judge and said, and Larry Pratt can back this up too, about the statistics that the federal government was using. She said, Your Honor, in the first 4 months, the Brady bill has prevented 250,000 felons from gaining access to guns in this country. And then he stopped her, and he said, Counselor, do not try to pretend in this courtroom that your statistical analysis somehow equates to constitutionality. And then that is how Scalia, in his ultimate ruling, said, no case-by-case weighing of the burdens or benefits is necessary. Such commands are fundamentally incompatible with our constitutional system of dual sovereignty. In other words, talking about state sovereignty, that the states are not subject to federal direction. And this whole thing is so principled that I had to put it in these books. And, of course, Judge John Roll is mentioned in every one of them, and now he's dead.
Amazing. And folks can find out more about those books at your website. Invaluable information. You've got some of your latest books on how to educate sheriffs and county commissioners about their proper role against the federal/international takeover at sheriffmack.com. And, Sheriff, we really look forward to speaking to you again in the near future. And be safe out there.
Thanks so much, Alex. I appreciate that. And the two books specifically that deal with Judge Roll are The Victory for State Sovereignty. You can get that for just a couple of bucks on the website. And then, of course, From My Cold, Dead Fingers, Why America Needs Guns. And Judge Roll plays a big part in both of those.
Absolutely. All right, Sheriff Richard Mack won at the Supreme Court for our Second Amendment. We'll talk to you again soon. We'll be right back with Larry Pratt, who heads up Gun Owners of America in the aftermath of these killings.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the sites, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.